We were looking at financial markets. We want to talk about now what is the central bank's policy instrument? Is it choosing the money supply or choosing the interest rate? Now, so far throughout, we have assumed that the central bank chooses the money supply and keeps it constant at the chosen level, and then it lets the interest rate be determined by equilibrium in that money market for its chosen value of M, where money demand is equal to given money supply. So if we go back, so here we assume that MS is equal to M bar is fixed by the central bank, right? This is what we assumed. The central bank chooses the money supply at M bar and keeps it constant at the chosen level, right? And then over here, we talked about how financial market equilibrium is, where money demand is equal to money supply and money supply is fixed by the central bank at M bar. So central bank chooses the money supply, keeps it constant at the chosen level, and then lets the interest rate I be determined in that equilibrium in the money market where its chosen M is equal to money demand. Right? This is what we saw graphically also, that the central bank fixes MS at M bar and then the interest rate is determined where the money demand curve intersects this money supply curve fixed by the central bank at M bar. And in this case, we saw interest rate adjusts to maintain money market equilibrium, right? Like when we saw nominal income increases, then here we talked about this for a given level of money supply fixed by the central bank at M bar. We saw interest rate increases to restore money market equilibrium when money demand increases, right? So what we've so far talked about is, okay, the central bank chooses the money supply and keeps it constant at the chosen level and then lets interest rate adjust to maintain money market equilibrium. But rather than the money supply, the central bank alternatively could have chosen the interest rate at which it wants the money market to clear. So instead of fixing, go back. So instead of fixing MS at M bar and then let interest rate be determined where this MS is equal to MD, the central bank could have alternatively chosen the interest rate at which it wants the money market to clear, right? So say the central bank wanted the money market to clear at I star. So then in that case, the central bank will set the money supply such that it makes the target interest rate consistent with equilibrium in the financial market. What does this mean? It will set the money supply such that the money supply curve will intersect the money demand curve at the desired interest rate target. So here, if its target interest rate was I star, right, and the relevant money demand curve was MDY1, so then it would set the money supply at MS1 such that this money supply curve intersects the money demand curve MDY1 at I star, its target interest rate, right? So it will ensure that this target interest rate is consistent with equilibrium in the money market. It will set MS in such a way because now it wants to choose the interest rate at which it wants the money market to clear I star. So if I want the money market to clear at I star, the relevant money demand curve is MDY1. So it will set the money supply at MS1 in order to ensure this money supply curve intersects the relevant money demand curve MDY1 at its target interest rate I star. Now, the central bank will keep the interest rate constant at its chosen level I star by adjusting the money supply in case of any changes in money demand, right? To ensure that money market equilibrium is maintained at I star. Otherwise, there'll be pressure on the interest rate to change, right? Like over here, we know that initially you're here, right? But what if money demand increases to MD, say Y3? So if money demand increases to MDY3 and you don't change the money supply stays at MS1. So we know there'll be an upward pressure on the interest rate, there'll be pressure on it to increase because of the increase in money demand. So to keep the interest rate at I star, once money demand increases from MDY1 to MDY3, the central bank will increase the money supply from M1S to MS3 in order to keep money market equilibrium at I star, right? If we were initially at this point 1 and say money demand decreased to MDY2, now we can see that if it keeps the money supply fixed at M1S, there'll be a pressure on the interest rate to decrease. So to keep the interest rate constant at I star, when money demand decreases to MDY2, it will reduce the money supply to MS2 in order to keep money market equilibrium at I star. Like it just needs to ensure that the money supply curve intersects the relevant money demand curve at its target interest rate. So if the relevant money demand curve was MTY1, then money supply curve would be set at M1S, because then this money supply curve is intersecting the relevant money demand curve at I star. If money demand were to increase to MDY3, then it would increase the money supply to MS3 in order to keep the money supply curve intersecting the relevant money demand curve at I star. If the money supply curve were to fall from M1S to M2S, then it would, if the money demand were to fall from MDY1 to MDY2, it will decrease the money supply from MS1 to MS2 so that the money supply curve intersects the relevant money demand curve at I star. So the goal here is that it keeps the money supply curve intersecting the relevant money demand curve with the desired target interest rate. So the central bank follows a policy of fixing the interest rate. Then we know in the background, the money supply is adjusting to accommodate any changes in demand. We start at 1. If money demand were to increase to MD by 3, then it would increase the money supply to maintain money market equilibrium at I star. If we start at 1 and money demand were to decrease to MD by 2, then it would decrease the money supply to maintain money market equilibrium at I star. So in the background, it's always adjusting the money supply to accommodate any changes in money demand. If money demand were to increase, it would increase the money supply to keep money market equilibrium at I star. If money demand were to decrease, it would decrease the money supply to keep money market equilibrium at I star. So it's not like the central bank can just announce that this is the value of the interest rate at which it wants the money market to play. So it can't just say that I want the target interest rate to be I star and just sit there. It must take measures so that this chosen interest rate is consistent with equilibrium in the financial market. So it needs to keep on adjusting the money supply to accommodate any fluctuations in money demand so that money market equilibrium stays at I star, right? So that it keeps the money supply curve intersecting the relevant money demand curve at I star. Otherwise, there would be pressure on the interest rate to increase or decrease. If I star is not the target interest rate, it won't stay there unless the central bank adjusts the money supply. Now, why is it useful to think about the central bank as choosing the interest rate? Because this is what modern central banks do, including the Fed. It's important to note here, the central bank can fix either the money supply or the interest rate, but not both, so it can't choose both. If it fixes the money supply, it must accept the interest rate implied by money demand, right? If it wants to fix the money supply at M star, then if money demand is MD by 1, then the interest rate it would have to accept as I1, right, for this fixed money supply. If money demand is MD by 2, then given the money supply it's chosen, it has to accept the interest rate I2. If money demand is MD by 3, then given the money supply it has chosen, M star, it has to accept the interest rate as I3. So if you're fixing the money supply, whenever the money demand fluctuates, the interest rate would fluctuate. Actually, you would have to accept the money, and you'd have to accept the interest rate in this case, given the money demand. Right? If it fixes the interest rate, it has to accept the money supply implied by demand for money, right? If you're fixing the interest rate as I star, if the money demand is MD by 1, then you need to set the money supply as M1S, so that this is where to maintain money market equilibrium at I star. If money demand is MD by 3, you need to accept that the money supply is MS3, right? So to maintain money market equilibrium at I star. If money demand is MD by 2, you need to accept the money supply is M2S to maintain money market equilibrium at I star, right? So you need to keep the money supply curve intersecting the relevant money demand curve with the target interest rate. So whenever money demand changes, you need to change money supply to maintain money market equilibrium at the target interest rate. So central bank has two options. It can either choose the money supply and keep it constant at the chosen level by letting the interest rate adjust to maintain money market equilibrium. In this case, like we saw, whenever money demand changes, interest rate is going to fluctuate to maintain money market equilibrium given its choice of it. Or it could choose the interest rate and keep it constant at the chosen level by adjusting the money supply. So in this case, whenever money demand changes, money supply will change to accommodate changes in money demand to maintain money market equilibrium at the target interest rate. So central bank can either choose the money supply or it can choose the interest rate, but not both.